Jew is someone who feels Jewish, says David Ben-Gurion, one of Israel's founding fathers in the aftermath of the war's martyrdom of his people, so often the victims of history's storms. The road to the birth of the State of Israel has been long and bloody, from the Dreyfus Affair to the Holocaust. How many ships, like the Exodus, crossed the sea carrying refugees in the camps? How many deaths in the War of Independence, leading to the actual immigrants turned back on reaching the shores of the Promised Land? How many tragedies before this flag could float over what would become the most explosive region of our planet? Jerusalem, at the beginning of the 20th century. The Wailing Wall has been the most sacred place in the world for all Jews for over 3,000 years. And this prayer has crossed the centuries. The prayer of Zion has inhabited the Jewish soul since the destruction of the temple and the first dispersion. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, may my right hand wither and my tongue cleave to my palate. Jerusalem summarizes all the spiritual destinies of the world. For the Jews, it's the holy city of David and Solomon. For Christians, it's Christ's Calvary and the birthplace of the church. For Muslims, it's the direction in which the true believers will turn at the end of time. For all, the sanctuary of the hope of man, the place of Abraham's sacrifice. A tiny distant enclave of the Ottoman Empire, Palestine is a crossroads between Europe, Asia, and Africa. Around 1880, 60,000 Jews lived there, in harmony with some 500,000 Muslims. Biblical prophecies and Judean nostalgia are more dream than reality for most Jews. The creation of a state in Palestine or elsewhere is out of the question, although the undertaking is evoked on religious holidays, at weddings, and during important Yiddish gatherings. The nationalist movement will first be seen in the Jewish centers of Eastern Europe, where Jewish culture, based on the extensive study of the Torah, is both profound and brilliant. It is the way to forget the surroundings, and a Jewish renaissance starts here around the end of the 19th century. The beginnings of anti-Semitism reinforce the idea of a Jewish homeland, no matter where. The first pogroms in southern Russia caused thousands of victims. In France, the Dreyfus Affair explodes in 1894. It's a fatal blow to those who believed in the possibility of Jewish assimilation. Alfred Dreyfus, a staff officer, is the prototype of the assimilated Jew. He's the victim of the defamatory plot denounced by Émile Zola in his article, I Accuse. The spreading wave of anti-Semitism in the country, responsible for the Rights of Man Declaration and the first to proclaim Jewish equality, is not seen as the warning it should have been, even before worse events occur. The journalist Theodor Herzl does see it and becomes the spokesman of those who are calling for a Jewish homeland. He writes, "The Jewish State," or Der Judenstaat. Events in Europe fueled the Zionist cause. The first bloody pogroms in Nicholas II's Russia coincide with the misery and oppression of the working class, whose uprisings will lead to the revolution. In England in 1903, the Minister for Colonial Affairs, Joseph Chamberlain, proposes Uganda for the creation of a Jewish state. The Zionist Congress refuses, and Chaim Weizmann replaces Theodor Herzl as chairman. Land is bought in Palestine with funds collected by the Jewish Bank, founded by the Zionist Congress. 4,000 Jews have already emigrated by 1903. The first kibbutz, Degania, is founded in 1910. It's a symbol of the faith of the pioneers of Eastern Europe who, unknowingly, are blazing the trail to the future state of Israel. At the beginning, these collective organizations are quite modest, a handful of colonists living in poverty. Little by little, there are impressive results. Oases appear in the desert. A hoe in one hand, a rifle in the other. The pioneers drain the marshes. An enormous amount of work is done, and the land becomes productive. There are 14 kibbutzim by 1914, and when Edmund de Rothschild, one of the most generous benefactors of the diaspora, comes from Europe to visit, he can barely believe his eyes. England inaugurates its double-language strategy with the First World War. Palestine is still under Turkish domination. London sows trouble in both camps in order to draw the often pro-German Jews toward the Allies. Great Zionist names enlist in the British Army, such as Jabotinsky and David Ben-Gurion. But Arab nationalism is also emerging, and the British will use it against the Turks. Two men will play a decisive part in the taking of Aqaba, the Palestinian port on the Red Sea. Prince Faisal and a fascinating Englishman, Colonel Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia. The Russian Revolution of October 1917 has just taken place. The Jews, led by Trotsky, have played an important part. The English figure they can bend the revolutionary current in their favor as long as the Jews receive satisfactory compensation. Another factor was to give the Zionists the gratitude of London, then in the final stages of negotiation for future Israel. Just as the British Navy was being pounded by German cannon, Chaim Weizmann, president of the Zionist Congress, but also a research chemist, came up with a formula for a synthetic explosive. Weizmann and 5 other characters will play decisive parts in the elaboration of the Balfour Declaration. Both Lloyd George, the British Prime Minister, and Edwin Montagu, the only Jew in the cabinet, are its prime defenders. But Claude Montefiore and Lionel de Rothschild are staunch opponents, as well as Pope Benedict XV, who refuses to accord a privileged status to those he calls unbelievers. The declaration was written in English by Lord Balfour. Each word is carefully chosen, and the text is open to several interpretations, which will lay heavily in the future. His Majesty's government looks favorably on the establishment of a national homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine, and will use all its efforts to facilitate the carrying out of this objective. The victors of 1918, France, Italy, and Great Britain, share the remains of the Ottoman Empire. At the San Remo Conference in April 1920, Paris takes Lebanon and Syria. London takes Iraq and Palestine. Transjordan is placed in the hands of Abdullah, Hussein's second son, and the British send troops to apply the now officially ratified Balfour Declaration. At first, the application of the declaration creates a climate of euphoria, even if the contours of the text are somewhat obscure. The Jews lend it weight and reality. Thousands immigrate and give both heart and soul to the land. With a Kazi mystical fervor, the colonists dig the foundations of the future capital. Tel Aviv rises out of the sand on the shore of the Mediterranean. The High Commissioners at the head of the Protectorate follow one another without any similarity. The first, Herbert Samuel, is a great statesman. His successors aren't. When Lord Balfour inaugurates the Jerusalem University, the first signs of unrest are obvious. Despite apparent calm, tension between Jews and Arabs is mounting due to political leaders. Mainly the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Hajj Amin el-Hussein. The main problem is immigration. The Jews don't accept limitations, and British quotas are not respected. The 1929 Jerusalem riots are followed by the Hebron massacre, which leads to British military reinforcement. The history of the mandate is pocked with clashes of contradictory interests between the British, the Arabs, and the Jews. In 1936, anti-Zionist riots increase, especially in Jaffa. The largest port of the country is blockaded, threatening Palestine with economic strangulation. The Grand Mufti is the leader of the revolt. He founds a Supreme Arab Council, which demands the halt of Jewish immigration and declares a general strike throughout the country. Violence spreads. Kibbutzim are attacked everywhere. Under Arab pressure, the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem is evacuated. The toll of the 1936 Arab revolt is heavy. 2,000 Arab casualties, 200 British soldiers, and 300 Jews. Outflanked, the British try to find the Grand Mufti, who has become their #1 enemy. He's already in Lebanon, making contact with the Nazis. Faced with Arab threats, the Jews build fortified villages with incredible speed and efficiency. A whole people, men, women, children, and the aged, build kibbutzim with prefabricated units on land taken from the Arabs. These operations, called forts and stockades, are carried out in guerrilla conditions, provoking even British admiration. A single day is usually enough. Land is taken, fortifications, an observation post, and a few huts are built. The enterprise is then given over to the Haganah, the recently formed secret Jewish army. Kibbutz means a group. It's the most original creation of the Jewish community. This socialist-inspired, brotherly collective unit supplies practical necessities as well as ideological requirements. It seemingly symbolizes the pioneer spirit that created Israel. In a kibbutz, all production means are put in common. There's no money in circulation. Members are equal partners, and decisions are made in General Assembly. Private property is kept to a minimum, and children are raised outside the family unit. But before the war, only a minority of Jews live in a kibbutz. An Arab delegation comes to London in 1939, asking Weizmann and Ben-Gurion to end Jewish emigration to Palestine. A third white paper is published, authorizing 75,000 immigrants over the next 5 years. A ridiculous figure, since anti-Semitism is rapidly spreading across Europe. The decision scandalizes all the Jews of Palestine. Meanwhile, the great Nazi rallies, with thousands of participants and the rights so dear to Hitler and Goebbels, are proliferating all over Germany. Beginning with the literary auto-da-fe, during which an entire culture was burnt, the Berlin synagogue was set afire on the Night of Crystal. There are 36 dead and 20,000 Jewish deportees. The most terrible death machine that mankind has ever seen is starting off on its inexorable march. Discriminatory measures are announced, as well as a Jewish commercial boycott, loudspeakers in the streets, as well as giant posters bearing a yellow Star of David, exhort the German population to refrain from buying Jewish. Civil servants and doctors are hit next. Since Germany must be purged of its Jews, their lives are made unbearable. In 6 months, over 25,000 Jews leave Germany. Albert Einstein is among those who reach New York. He joins a numerous Jewish colony because the frontiers of Palestine are closed. In France, there are several extreme right movements. Among them, the Croix de Feu, who were not anti-Semitical, and whose head, the Colonel de la Roque, was going to die in deportation. The war is about to break out. For the first time, Hitler, between nationalist and Aryan theories, threatens European Jews with total annihilation. September 1939. Poland falls after the Blitzkrieg. German troops occupy Warsaw after 15 days. In a month, Hitler rules 3/4 of the country. Arrests following denunciation are the order of the day. The Jews are subjected to physical persecution. At first, they are herded into reserved areas. The most notorious is the Warsaw Ghetto, where desolation and famine reign. 500,000 Jews are enclosed in 1941. It's a slow death on the spot and deportation or execution for those who try to escape. Millions of refugees take to the roads in a tragic exodus when the German-Soviet pact is broken and the German army invades Russia. Central Europe is chaos. In the midst of the storm, the Jews are now marked for destruction. The Pétain-Hitler handshake at Montoire symbolizes Vichy-Berlin collaboration. A wave of anti-Semitism sweeps France, exceeding by far the Nazis' expectations. Here is the commentary of a propaganda newsreel on an exhibition called The Jew and France.
Pendant les 3 premiers jours, 13 000 personnes ont visité ce remarquable ensemble où les documents...
Two grinning executioners, Himmler and Eichmann, men who govern all the deportations. In his speech, Hitler has just announced the final solution, an attempt to exterminate all European Jewry.
Wenn das Judentum sich etwa einbildet, einen internationalen Weltkrieg zur Ausrottung der europäischen Rassen herbeiführen zu können, dann wird das Ergebnis nicht die Ausrottung der europäischen Rassen, sondern die Ausrottung des Judentums in Europa sein.
Highly effective death factories with gas chambers and crematoriums are operating from Auschwitz to Mauthausen, Bergen-Belsen to Treblinka. Himmler, head of the Gestapo, enters a concentration camp to check its results. No one realizes yet what is happening, except the Nazis. This smiling 24-year-old is Mordecai Anielewicz, the embodiment of the Warsaw resistance movement, which saved thousands of lives. It takes the German 3 days to destroy the ghetto, but the final combat will take even longer. House by house, street by street, the ghetto is leveled, and the last resistance killed between April 19 and May 16, 1943. The Allies liberate the camps in May 1945. Finally, the world learns the immensity of the horror of deportation. The number of victims requires no commentary. 1 million children and 5 million adults have been exterminated. 3/4 of European Jewry, 1/3 of the Jewish population in the world. The survivors of the Holocaust and of Nazi fury only have one thought left: to find a country of refuge and to live in peace. Despite British promises, Palestine's frontiers remain closed. Silently, the Jews return to the camps, transit camps. But the diaspora is active. Many Zionist organizations, mostly American, send help, food, and medicine to the refugees. Meanwhile, the Arab League, consisting of Abdullah, King Farouk of Egypt, Faisal of Saudi Arabia, and representatives from Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq, meet in Cairo. In London, a conference organized by Bevan and chaired by Prime Minister Clement Attlee is boycotted by the Jews. The Labour Party forgets its promises and maintains the quotas imposed by the Conservative Party.
I need hardly tell you how much His Majesty's government deplore the state of unrest and disturbance into which Palestine has been plunged.
Confronted with political blocking, clandestine immigration is organized. Thousands of men, women, and children embark on any ship afloat and sail for the Promised Land. One of the most vibrant episodes of Jewish history was composed of a dozen epic stories like this one about the President Warfield, the ship that was symbolically renamed Exodus by its passengers. Exodus secretly set sail from Sète in southern France with 4,554 passengers, men, women, and children. During the crossing, British aircraft continually fly over the ship, forcing the refugee families to hide below decks. After several days crossing, the goal seems near. Despite fatigue, hope returns. The immigrants break out Jewish flags and prepare to set foot on the Palestinian shore. Unfortunately, the Exodus is intercepted off Haifa by the Royal Navy and ordered to return to France. Passengers are transferred to 3 British vessels, and after 10 days at sea, arrive off Port de Bouc. July 29, 1947. After endless negotiations, Paris puts a disaffected American Army cap at the refugees' disposal. But apart from those who are ill, the refugees refuse to disembark anywhere, except Palestine. On deck, the heat, lack of air, and proximity are intolerable. There isn't any more drinking water left. The British send an ultimatum on August 21, disembark in France or be taken prisoner. After violent clashes with the British troops, the Exodus survivors will be transferred to transit camps in Cyprus. The odyssey of the Exodus, like those of all the other ships that attempted the crossing to the Promised Land, is part of the movement which will lead to the establishment of the State of Israel a few months later. Upon their arrival in Cyprus, the former deportees, both men and women, are placed behind barbed wire for the 3rd time in several months. After terrible hardship, they will all enroll in the Haganah. The Irgun, Menachem Begin's clandestine organization, and the Stern Group, often called the Stern Gang, both extreme right-wing movements created in the 30s, will join forces to help the clandestine immigrants in trouble since 1946. For several months, their terrorist tactics cause heavy damage to British installations. Considerable reinforcements are sent. There is 1 British soldier for every 6 Jews. Zionist resistant leaders are arrested. Among them, David Ben-Gurion and several rabbis. The day is called the Black Sabbath. Menachem Begin goes into hiding. Here he is disguised as a rabbi. His terrorist activities at the head of the Irgun will increase during the following months. Then, July 22, 1946, the Irgun blows up the King David Hotel, the British service headquarters. Despite telephone threats, the hotel was not evacuated. The result is 104 casualties. However, there are those who disapprove of the assault, such as Chaim Weizmann and David Ben-Gurion, who would prefer a legal approach. But other attacks will follow, such as the one against the Goldsmith Club, also in Jerusalem. This is the climax of the fight against the British, who live in a continual state of alert. British soldiers continually search houses looking for caches of arms, ammunition, and explosives. Members of the Stern Group are apprehended, judged, and executed. Cautiously, London evacuates officers and civil servants' families. Everywhere, in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, or Haifa, the British hide behind barbed wire, in compounds the Jews ironically call Bevingrad, after the head of the Foreign Office, Mr. Bevin. Overwhelmed by the situation, England requests a special session in the United Nations devoted to Palestine. A decision is made to send a commission on the spot to try to find a solution for the conflict. The Exodus affair is taking place at this time, and tension is at a high point.
You all know how to vote. Those who are in favor will say yes, those who are against will say no. And the abstainers, always they know what to say.
Several weeks of inquiry and 30 work sessions later, the Commission proposes a new partition of Palestine. 2 independent states, one Arab and the other Jewish, and Jerusalem, an international city.
Argentina, abstention. Australia, yes. Belgium, yes. Ethiopia, abstain. France, yes.
I call on the public, and I hope that you will not have any interference on the voting, on the debate. I am confident on the way you will behave in a so serious decision taken by this assembly, because I am decided not to allow anybody to interfere in our decisions.
South Africa, yes. Soviet Union, yes. United Kingdom, abstain. The United States, yes.
This plan is accepted, November 29, 1947, with barely 1 vote above the required 2/3 majority. There is support from France, the United States, and the Soviet Union.
The resolution of the DUC Committee for Palestine was adopted by 33 votes, 13 against, 10 abstentions.
The The plan is more favorable to the Jews than prior ones and grants them the Negev desert. But the new states look like a patchwork quilt, and no mention is made of access to the Red Sea. The Jews accept, but the Arabs reject the plan. In the name of the future state, Ben-Gurion sends envoys abroad to buy arms. Golda Meir leaves for America, seeking funds. The Arabs follow suit. Everyone expects the worst. The Jews open hostilities, blowing up Arab headquarters in the Semiramis Hotel, killing 36. The Arabs retaliate a month later, bombing the Palestine Post and setting off another bomb in Ben Yehuda Street, the largest commercial artery in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem. Again in Jerusalem, the Arabs bomb a wing of the Jewish Agency building. Escalation reaches a sad pinnacle with the Deir Yassim massacre. The majority of Jews will disapprove of this Zionist assault. April 9, 1948, a joint commando from the Irgun and the Stern Gang exterminate a small Arab village, Deir Yassim. There are 254 dead, men, pregnant women, and children. The act sows panic among local Arabs who abandon their village. To supply Jerusalem and the Jewish quarter, isolated from the rest of the country, convoys have to use a narrow road between steep hillsides. Ambushes are frequent, and the Jews have to improvise armor for their trucks. The situation has moved from armed conflict to real warfare, with both camps mobilized. The Haganah merges with the Irgun and the Stern Group. Efficiently, they organize the defenses of isolated kibbutzim, fortify villages, and train everyone for warfare, including women. The Jewish Secret Service obtains the British evacuation plan. The Jews know when and where to strike and how to acquire the principal strategic positions. The British leave Palestine May 14, 1948, putting an end to a 31-year mandate and only too aware of the explosive mess they're leaving behind. Tired, disappointed, feeling himself cut off from London, the last High Commissioner, Lord Cunningham, boards ship at Haifa, taking the Union Jack with him. When the new flag is raised, that afternoon, the new nation is filled with foreboding. At 2 o'clock, in a hall of the Tel Aviv Museum, David Ben-Gurion reads the chart of independence of the new state called Israel. The United States and the Soviet Union recognize it immediately. But rejoicing will be brief. As the Israelis dance, the neighboring Arab nations are mobilizing to attack the infant state, which is still hardly able to defend itself with a mere 50,000 soldiers and several thousand volunteers. Not very much compared to the Arab armies across the border. What followed was predictable. The next day, May 15, the Arab armies cross into Palestine unopposed. Within 2 hours, Abdullah's Arab Legion, led by British officers, enters Jerusalem. The Jewish defenses of the old city fall back after the initial assaults. Isolated, ill-equipped, lacking both food and water, and divided on the choice of tactics to employ, the Jews lose ground to the Arabs, led by Sir John Bagot, better known as Pasha Glubb, a former officer of the British Army. Only modern Jerusalem manages to hold its positions. In Transjordan, Abdullah's aims are clear. Unofficially backed by Great Britain, he wants to annex Palestine and Jerusalem. 20,000 Syrian, 10,000 Lebanese, 25,000 Egyptian, and 15,000 Iraqi soldiers have joined his fight. The siege of Jerusalem lasts 6 months. The situation is critical. Food is rationed, water is scarce. At this point, the Israelis accomplish an incredible feat. Amid the ongoing communications battle, they succeed in opening a second Tel Aviv-Jerusalem supply line right beneath the Arabs' disbelieving eyes. History will call it the Road of Courage. Despite this heroic action, the Jews of the old city are forced to evacuate, and the area falls into Abdullah's hands. It was followed by some Arab looting. June 11th, the Security Council of the United Nations imposes a first truce. The Haganah wounded, having fought with desperate energy, are taken to a French convent, transformed into a hospital and supervised by Red Cross doctors. Transjordan's flag is raised in Jerusalem. Abdullah enters the city in triumph, hailed by Arab crowds. His first act is to visit the Omar Mosque. The Jews' first act is to recover arms and equipment. The United Nations orders a second truce, which lasts from July to October. Count Bernadotte, the UN envoy, will successively meet Pasha Glubb, commander of the Arab armies, and Sherat, the Israeli foreign minister. Together, they try to devise a new partition plan that will satisfy both parties, but it is rejected. The plan called for a reduction of Israeli territory, and Count Bernadotte is assassinated September 17. Simultaneously, Washington and Moscow send ambassadors to Israel. The final great military campaign is the conquest of the Negev Desert. The victorious Jewish offensive forces reach Beersheba October 21. Galilee is reclaimed by October 31. The army stops at Eilat on the Red Sea, ending operations. An armistice is signed in Rhodes, February 24, 1949. Israel controls part of Jerusalem, but loses the Wailing Wall. The city, which is now the capital of the new state, is divided in two. The two Zionist leaders, David Ben-Gurion and Chaim Weizmann, respectively become head of government and president of Israel. The population grows slowly in young Israel. The government organizes the repatriation of diaspora Jews from all over the world. Flying Carpet is the operation that brings back Iraqis and Yemenites. In all, over 100,000 refugees come to increase the population. Israel may have won the battle, but it has not gained peace. 19 centuries after the destruction of the temple, 3 years after the most terrible genocide in history, the establishment of a Jewish national state is an exceptional event, but it will also weigh heavily in many consciences. The area will become one of the hottest spots in the world.